Hello everyone. This is the 21st part of the story, Abe the Wizard. Chapter 81, The Wirgin's Secret Hideout. Finally, the Wolf Riders were starting to lose their composure. They were invading against an invisible defender, one whose firepower was much more fierce than what they had. These Wolf Riders felt powerless from the bottom of their hearts. As the higher-ranked commanders gave a howl to the rest of the packs, all of them started fleeing from their posts. There were about 50 dead Wolf Riders lying on the ground right now. Sweep the battlefield. As Lord Marshal gave his command, and the knights marched forward, finishing all the Wolf Riders that remained. Whether they were dead or not, all of them were stabbed with a knife in their chest. The veterans seemed used to this situation. They all had a blank look on their faces when they got rid of Mount Wolves that were guarding their masters' dead bodies. Abel sighed at the sight of that. While these Mount Wolves already claimed their masters, there was a slight chance that they could find new ones. The easy way to settle this was to kill them all. Abel knew that a long time ago, but his heart ached when he realized that Black Wind previously had to suffer the exact same fate. A knight does not leave his mount, the Knight of Marshall scolded Abel as he walked towards him. But it'll be killed if I don't, Abel protested. The Knight of Marshall said with a straight face that he rarely wore, that's because you aren't as experienced as a knight yet. If you want to protect your mount, make sure you don't get knocked down first. It's the most basic requirement of a proper knight. Abel thought back on the training that he did. While he thought of some of the moves as unnecessary, now that he's thought about it, they were all meant to deflect attacks that were aimed at his mount. I'm sorry, Uncle Marshall, Abel apologized, I didn't have the right understanding of what a knight should be like. You are talented, boy, but don't let your powers delude you. Remember, it is very important to go back to your basics. You have a long way ahead of you. While the Knight of Marshall condemned Abel for his immaturity, he was glad to see that Abel was sincere enough to learn from his mistakes. For geniuses like him, pride was a very big obstacle to get over with. Once the Knight of Marshall and Abel returned to the castle, everyone was cheering for them at the front gate. Not only had they won, but they also did with 0 casualties. Such a feat would be impossible if they weren't strong enough, and everyone who lived on this land took pride in their lord's strength. A real man waits 10 years for his revenge. Abel didn't really agree with this saying. For him, he believed that it's best to settle things down before the sun sets up again. As Abel waved his hand at the Knight of Marshall, he equipped himself with a full set of armor, took the hairy bow, and walked towards the forest behind the hairy castle. Hey, White Cloud! Abel came to an empty spot inside the forest. He called out for his sky sparrow's name in his mind, and soon, he received a reply coming from the sky. It was White Cloud, and its huge body quickly made a landing on the ground next to him. White Cloud was making a lot of noise when it first saw Abel. It was complaining that Abel didn't spend a lot of time with it, so Abel had to pat its head for it to calm down. Abel laughed as White Cloud lowered its head towards him. Come on, White Cloud. Let's fly for a bit. After he said that, Abel jumped on White Cloud's back and readied his flight. White Cloud gave a loud shriek in response and quickly leaped into the sky. They were already flying pretty high in the first few seconds, but Abel told White Cloud to go even higher. Pretty soon, both of them were at the same level as the clouds. This was about as high as White Cloud could fly. Everything on the ground looked so tiny from Abel's view. Actually, that's what he preferred this time because there were a lot of targets he had to allocate. There were 100 Wolf Riders that he had to find, and it was easy to do so if he was, literally, sitting on a bird's back. It didn't take long for Abel to find what he was looking for. The Wolf Riders were moving very fast when he had found them. At first, Abel had thought that they were trying to move their wounded soldiers to a safe location, but judging from how determined they appeared to be, they must have known what their destination was already. Follow them, White Cloud, Abel commanded White Cloud telepathically, and White Cloud lowered its speed as it flew over the Wolf Riders. After 3 hours of tailing behind these wolf riders, they eventually found a fruit grove that belonged to the humans. Abel did not saw that coming. He didn't think that there would be humans who would welcome a pack of virgins. So these virgins did have a secret hideout in the human realm, but just who would be so daring as to collaborate with them? Abel took out a map from his pocket. What it showed him was, while this fruit grove was technically still inside Harvest City, it was much closer to Cedar City, an area that was too desolate to have many records to it. Even the map that Abel had wasn't showing a lot of information about it. Abel tapped White Cloud on the back. Pretty soon, it lowered itself down and made a landing behind a mountain far away from the fruit grove. After Abel jumped down from its back, it was now free to move however it wanted. Luckily for Abel, he didn't have to do much to keep White Cloud in check. As big as sky sparrows were, they were very timid creatures that would rarely do anything to catch attention. Apart from their mealtime, they would often fly so high that nothing would be able to catch it. Most people wouldn't even notice its existence, because from what they would see, these birds were just clouds that were floating around the sky. After tidying up his equipment for a bit, Abel quickly ran towards the direction of the fruit grove. As he ran, he thought about how he didn't have to run anymore when Black Wind was old enough to carry him around. Black Wind would take care of short-distance travel, and White Cloud would take care of long-distance travel. If Abel wanted to go somewhere, he would just let White Cloud take him there first and then ride Black Wind on his way down. He could use a horse to do the same job, but the horses had to recover for a while after they've spent some time in high altitude. Abel had to stop his feet when he was about 1 kilometer away from the fruit groves. There were simply far too many virgins inside, and their sense of smell could have easily tracked him if he was any closer. Abel rested his lance under a tree and climbed up its branch for a better view inside the fruit grove. Instead of going in for a rush attack, he was more interested in finding out how these virgins were sustaining themselves inside the human world. And what an ironic sight he has found. Inside this fruit grove, humans and virgins were living together in harmony. They seemed to be getting along fairly well, and from what it looked like, the humans were even offering food for the virgins. For the hundreds of mount wolves that were inside the fruit grove, there were a few human servants that were pushing a cart full of pigs to feed them. On the other side of the place, the virgins were eating as they sat on the ground. Apart from their commanders, because of how many of them there were, most of them did not bother to use a seat or a table. Suddenly, a door from inside the yard was opened. From what it looked like, a fat human and 2 virgins came out from the inside. Abel was kind of surprised to see that. He recognized this human. It was the shop owner of Gary's potion store inside Harvest City. Abel didn't know what this man's name was, but he did buy some potions from Gary's potion store. He was still new to Harvest City at the time, but he did remember this man doing something at the store's counter. Because of how ridiculously good Abel's memory was, there was no way that he could have got it wrong. Suddenly, one of the 2 virgins started looking towards Abel's direction. Abel quickly closed his eyes, stopped his breathing, and attempted to erase his presence as much as he could. "What is wrong, Master Fowler?" Fat Darren asked as he noticed the look on Fowler's face. The wargen named Fowler replied, "Nothing, Mr. Darren. I must have been mistaken or something. We had a very successful deal, Master Fowler." A wide grin appeared on Darren's face. "I look very much forward towards our next exchange." Unlike Darren, Fowler was not looking forward to their next meeting at all. He was profiting from the deal they've made this time, but anyone would be disgusted at someone who was willing to sell his own kind. Fowler revealed a fake smile as he replied, "Good to do business with you, Mr. Darren. The Wolf family will not treat you poorly. We will bring more things to trade with you the next time. Come here next time, Master Fowler, and I shall hold a wine fest just for you." Darren bowed. For now, he just wanted to leave the fruit grove as quickly as he could. The more virgins that were coming into this place, the less safe he felt for his own life. If he said something wrong to these animals, they might just bite his head off right where he was standing. Chapter 82, A Despicable Man. It's finally over. Darren sighed with a sense of relief. The feeling of being watched by more than 100 Wargen freaked him out. Although he had dealt with Wargen a few times, the fear of the Wargen in his heart was still the same. Darren's carriage was large, but not luxurious. As an ordinary businessman, he was not qualified to ride a luxury carriage, and today the carriage was coming full of goods. Now, the goods had been replaced by a small bag of Orc Empire's specialty, so the carriage looked empty at this time. Gently patting the big bag around him, Darren's fat face was full of smiles. He murmured proudly, "The accumulated past 10 years of business is not as profitable as today, thank God. Reese, speed up, then you will have a special reward when we get back." Darren shouted to the carter. He felt unsecured when bringing such a big amount of money. Carter Reese was a junior warrior and also Darren's guard. The fewer people know the transaction happened today, the better, so Darren only brought the most reliable personal guard. "Yes, sir." The inferior horse with the carriage started to run faster after Reese whipped it. Although the inferior horse sped up, Darren was still dissatisfied, but he has no solution for that. He said unhappily, "I'm done with this inferior horse. I'll go change it into a war horse after I get back." Reese didn't answer. Both of them actually understood that it was impossible for Dale to buy a war horse. War horses were exclusive for knights, so they cannot be bought when you got a huge amount of money. Without corresponding identity, you would also be captured by the terrible aristocratic arbitral tribunal for blasphemy. "When I make enough money, we go to the Duchy of Thunder. I heard that you could get the title of a lord by donating. I will become a lord, and you will be my knight." Darren's fat face was full of imagination as if the dream had already come true. The carriage stopped slowly. Darren cursed, "Reese, why the hell did you stop?" When Darren opened the door of the carriage and leaned out, he saw a short knight in blue armor standing next to the carriage. His personal guard, Reese was also a junior warrior, has been grabbed with a single hand and held it in his hand. At that moment, Reese was paralyzed and seemed to be strangled to death already. It was Abel who came. It's impossible for who was eager to find the news let go of the human carriage coming out from the Virgin's manor. Abel suddenly appeared next to the carriage just now. When Reese was about to attack, he had been strangled by Abel already. Reese's neck broke when Abel only used a little bit of strength grasping the neck. Abel was also reluctant. The constant growing strength did not stop at the end of the promotion. Now the knight training every day and knight's breathing techniques at night let the light golden combat chi flow through the whole body, and the light golden combat chi seems to have a strong effect on the body. Because of its powerful of will, Abel could now feel the increase in strength every day. Whoever thought that just a pinch would kill a junior warrior? This junior warrior's physical fitness condition was too bad. Abel forgot that he usually practiced with intermediate knight Lord Marshal. It was impossible to compare the body of the intermediate knight with the body of the junior warrior. Even the 5th level of novice knights are stronger than the junior warrior's body. It could be seen from the food they eat. The meat that Abel now eats every day is the best part of the beast. He threw away the dead driver's body in his hand. There was no guilt for the driver's death. Abel's direct killing is the lightest punishment. If it is in accordance with the law, the entire family would have been killed. Reese's body slammed to the ground with a bang. Darren's fat body trembled, and his fat flickered. Then his teeth began to fight, making a giggle sound, and his lower body was wet. The urine scared by the Wargen was finally scared out at this time. Seeing this fat man's reaction, Abel felt angry and funny at the same time. This businessman who can betray human beings was as timid as a mouse. Really don't know how he could have started a business with Wargen. "Please, don't kill me. I'll give you everything you want." Darren begged in front of the knight whose face was covered by his helmet, though he knew it was not surprising that he died thousands of times if anyone knew what he did, but his strong desire to survive still made him plead. Say it. What's the relationship between you and the wargen? Abel frowned, took a step back because of the fat man was full of stench in front of him. I just came to give food to the wargen, and didn't do any business with them. Darren explained immediately without any thinking. Doing business? Abel found the clue directly in Darren's sentence. No business. It was found that due to the nervousness, what could usually speak can make mistakes one after another. Darren Keep denied it. Abel's iron-gloved finger lightly touched Darren's left arm, only heard a click, his left arm bone was broken. The intense pain made Darren was about to yell, but Abel's fingers had quickly appeared in front of his eyes, and the metal fingers in front of him were like the hands of a demon, scared Darren who just wanted to yell to stop, sweating all over the body due to the severe pain, but Darren tolerated the pain and did not dare to speak. My patience is limited and my temper is not good. Every time you tell a lie, I break a bone. You have 206 bones. You still have a lot of opportunities to lie. Abel's voice was very light, just like sitting with a friend and chatting. But when he heard it, it seemed like he was listening to the terrible demonic words. His whole body shivered even more. He didn't know how many bones there were in humans. This was the content of the education of noble knights, but he knew when every bone in the body is broken, it would cause pain that is worse than death. I'll tell the truth, I'll tell the truth. Darren's psychological defense was defeated, and he no longer wanted to keep anything at this time, said directly, I came to trade support potion with werewolf, these are items that were exchanged from the wargen. Darren pointed to the bag that had fallen to the ground in the carriage. Abel stepped forward and held the bag in his hand. When he opened it, he found that it was all the same dry flour. He had about 20 pounds in his hand. Abel was not familiar with flowers and plants and asked, what is this? This is the Dementor grass. Ordinary people would be addicted to it and indulge in hallucinations, but it is the element for most promotion potion, and the human world produced very little. Darren realized that there was no life danger at the moment, so tried to answer everything Abel asked. Abel couldn't help criticizing, aren't this just drugs? If it wasn't the element for promotion, I'm afraid it would be the same as drugs in another world. Say it, how did you contact the Wargens? Don't tell me you can contact them by yourself. Abel asked. Darren looked at Abel with a sense of embarrassment, his eyes turned around, and he was about to come up with some excuses, but then Abel's iron fingers appeared again in his eyes. It's the 7th Prince, Prince Middleton George, and I was his deputy in Harvest City. Darren almost cried to say the whole sentence. What kind of asshole son did King Spence George bear? Abel could not help but curse, then looked at Darren with a smile and asked, I'm done, the last question. What do you have to save your life? Darren seemed to see the hope of life, and his strong desire to survive made his eyes piercingly pleaded, and said in succession, I hid 20,000 gold coins in the basement of Gary's potion store in Harvest City. There are a lot potions in stock. I'll give them all to you. Please let me go. Basement? Where is it? Abel asked. Under my bed. Darren has found something wrong right after he said it. The method of interrogation used by Abel is a surprising way of interrogation that he saw in previous lives. It can be seen in many films and television works. And it turned out that people who hadn't seen movies and televisions were immediately uttered. Darren looked terrible at the moment. As the last chip was handed over, what was waiting for him is already obvious. Chapter 83, Item Looting. After Darren died, Abel threw 2 bodies onto the carriage, patted the horse, and let the horse leave freely. A bag full of soul-catcher grass hung on the treetop of the tree. This time, Abel wouldn't take a second look at the Wargen's hideout. He's caught the attention of the Wargen just by looking at Darren. Fortunately, he responded quickly and changed his sight in time. Such keen senses did not belong to a high-ranked wolf rider. That war gen was a high-ranking commander. A wolf rider commander was here, rushing out hastily to inquire would be suicidal. Abel thought that his equipment was not enough to protect himself. This wolf rider was in the same rank as Viscount Dickens, whose aura was frighteningly powerful for anyone to dare close in on him. Such an opponent could not be defeated with just magic weapons. But Abel didn't want just to leave. The wolf riders who attacked Harry Castle were right in front of him. Whilst being put in a dilemma, he suddenly thought of the transformation necklace. Maybe the necklace can transform him into a war gen. For someone like Abel, once he thought of something, he would start doing it right away. After stripping off his armor, he hid all his equipment under a tree and took out his transformation necklace. He held it in his hand, chanted out the words he's said so many times before, and was turned into a war gen under a familiar green light. Apart from getting my muscles and bones torn up, the necklace is actually pretty nice, Abel said in a half-praising, half-sarcastic manner. As Abel walked to the manor, he started planning for his escape if he were to fail this infiltration. He pressed his hand on his Horadric Cube and looked at the 3 improved exploding big swords. If his disguise was blown, he would probably throw these 3 exploding big swords to his pursuers, and then quickly run away by summoning White Cloud. With a backup strategy in mind, Abel was now much more confident to walk inside the manor, and because of how relaxed he was, the war gen that was guarding the door didn't seem to bother checking him at all. Seriously? Not even a body check. And these dogs want to invade the humans. Abel thought to himself. If the security measure here were a little stricter, he would have been running away by now. In fact, Abel couldn't blame the guarding war gen for such negligence of duty. This manor was usually tightly guarded. A signal whistle could be heard here all day long. Anyone approaching had to be examined by the human guard first, and then by the wargens themselves. In just today, there were more than 100 wolf riders in the manor house, and many wounded people were brought in. A large number of people were serving these wolf riders. With so many in here, no one would dare to spy here. Abel was kind of a particular case. Without checking a second time, the guard just assumed that Abel was also one of those wargens, and when Abel entered the manor, the wolf rider who rested in the yard thought that Abel was a war gen in the manor. In this way, Abel is able to get inside the manor with just a few nods of his head. The low-ranked wolf riders were eating. Judging from the way they've talked amongst themselves, failing the invasion made them feel humiliated, and they became fearful of the humans who lived in Harry Castle. They actually thought that their opponents were blessed with some sort of divine gifts. This was the simple mentality of ordinary wargens. Any invincible opponent would be deified by them. Such a habit made Abel want to laugh at them, but at the same time, it was also reassuring to hear that they wouldn't harass Harry Castle again. At the same time, Abel learned that the highest leader here was a wolf rider commander called Fowler. Fowler was here, and the distance from here to Harvest City was enough to avoid the detection of masters like Viscount Dickens. Besides, by standing his post here, Fowler could also support the wolf riders without letting anyone take away this precious hideout. The manor was purchased by the Wolf family from the 7th Prince, Middleton George. It was also a trading place for business with Prince Middleton. Prince Middleton was happy to trade with war gen in this remote place. After all, trading with orcs was risky. Abel did not hesitate. Most of the time, after he came to the manor, he observed the manor, the warehouse and the house where Commander Fowler stayed gained most of Abel's attention. After an hour, there was a sharp howl from a far direction, and then another cry, but this howl was closer than the previous one. It was audible. Then, a howl came again not far from the manor, and a guard hurried toward the Commander Fowler. "What's going on? Why would you use this kind of emergency messaging?" One of the wolf rider asked another. It seemed that the wolf rider next to him was a war gen who was familiar with the signal. The war gen said with pride, "The message just passed said that there was a situation 20 miles ahead." Not sure what the situation was. Howls like these can't convey information that is too complicated. 20 miles. Was the carriage discovered by the Wargen scout? The more Abel thought, the more likely it was. While Abel was thinking, a shadow came out of the middle house of the manor. It was Commander Fowler. He howled, and then another faint black shadow rushed and stopped suddenly at the side of Commander Fowler. This rapid deceleration was a violation of the laws of physics. Such powers and keen senses, Abel admired. As Commander Fowler turned towards the Mount Wolf, it charged straight towards the gate without a care for the fence in front of it. Its leap was about 4 meters high. Everything was so fast that Abel couldn't see it properly. This was a scarce opportunity. Abel stood up, and while all the Wargens focused on the Commander Fowler, he turned close to the room left by Commander Fowler and opened the door gently. Abel found that the Wargen's body was more flexible than the human body. Despite all the movements he just did, no sound was made at all. The reason was that the Wargens had meat pads on their hands and feet. They could withdraw their claws while sneaking and extend their claws to attack. He entered into Commander Fowler's room. The furnishings in the room were straightforward: a large bed, a table, a chair, a night pearl illuminated above the head, and that was all. A small bag was placed on the table. Abel stepped forward and opened the small bag. From the outside, it was a small bag, but after opening it, he felt that inside the bag had a vast space, about the size of a room. Abel was very excited to see this. This was the first time he saw the first space storage item other than a Horadric Cube. He had never heard of such a storage item before. He settled down. Anyway, it was already his once it was in his hands, Abel thought. He did not know how the Wargen used this storage item. He directly entered it with his power of the will. It was full of potions. Abel was very familiar with these potions. The blood-fusing potions, replenishing potions, and essence-condensing potion. The 3 combat chi-enhanced potions were special medicine that is strictly forbidden to flow out of the human world. Even when Abel bought it for a large amount, he was afraid of being suspected as a smuggler. All the potions were densely packed in the small bag, and the quantities were not counted, but according to Abel's estimates, these should be enough for him to consume for 2 months, which means that there are potions worth more than 1.2 million gold coins. This gift was just about enough to make Abel forgive what these wolf riders did to Harry Castle. Well, at least for the time being. Abel turned around and found an animal skin on the bed. Abel did not saw it when he first came in. When he looked closely, he found that this animal skin had a very slight aura to it. Although this aura was barely noticeable, weirdly enough, it was found on a dead animal's hide, and not from a living beast. Just how powerful was this beast when it was alive? Abel stopped thinking. He stepped forward to roll up the animal skin, put it in a small bag, and checked the room. The pillow was also pretty nice. He could feel the coolness as soon as he put his hands on it. He tried putting it behind his head, and as soon as he felt a sense of comfortableness with it, he quickly put it in his bag as to not fall asleep right away. Chapter 84, Time to Loot. Abel put his hand on the table. He wasn't sure why, but he could feel that the wood was reacting to his power of the will. This was the first time he had discovered an item that could boost his mental powers. Although Captain Fowler's room appeared to be empty, everything here was all useful stuff. Even though he couldn't recognize some of the stuff, he couldn't waste the chance of not taking them away. Anyways, there was still a lot of space in the bag, so he threw everything in. After a while, the big bed, the table, and the chair was gone. He could still take away the floor tiles. The tile was made of jade of the same color. Abel just couldn't let them go to waste, so he took out a small dagger and started to prying on the floor beneath him. Since he was a Wargen, it didn't take much time for Abel to take away all the tiles from the room. After, the room was barely beyond recognition. Abel took off the night pearl above his head and murmured to himself, "I almost forgot that I have 5 of these in the Abel castle, and with this one, it will be a perfect match." When Abel snuck out of the room, no wargen noticed him at all. Since Captain Fowler had called for a defense against any unexpected invasion, everyone had already for the front door of the secret hideout. Realizing how much stuff he stole, Abel found a corner, jumped very hard, placed his hands on the top of the wall, got himself out of the wall. He looked back at the 4-meter-high fence and shook his head. After stealing so many things from here, he didn't think the Wirgens would stay if he was to come for a second time. Abel retrieved his lance, armor, and other equipment. He took the big bag containing the soul catcher grass from the tree, threw them all into the portal bag, and ran back towards the mountain he had dropped White Cloud at. When Abel rode on White Cloud and fly to the cloud, he heard a heartbreaking howl in the direction of the manor. Abel felt kind of sorry when he heard it. Yeah, who wouldn't be sad when a thief had robbed everything from one of their rooms? After Captain Fowler heard about Darren, he rode his Mount Wolf to the place where the incident happened, only to find out that the fat man was killed a few hours ago. After checking Darren's carriage, Captain Fowler guessed that he was targeted because of his money. While no sympathy was spared for him, Fowler had to find a new way to contact the 7th Prince again, which meant any ongoing trade would have to be delayed for the time being. As Captain Fowler inspected the scene, an ominous feeling started coming over to him. He was very accurate in this kind of thing. Because of how keen his senses were, he could foresee dangers coming from miles away from him. But just when he thought that an invasion was coming towards him, his room was already invaded by a thief. Oh no! Captain Fowler thought of the bag that was made of Orc's spirit portal. That was the treasure of the clan, and it was the key item for the wolf family to transport items. Even if there was a giant transporting flying animal like a sky sparrow, there was simply not enough space on its back to carry so many military items. There was no longer time to investigate the dead fat man. Without any second thought, Fowler rode his Mount Wolf back to the secret hideout. But when he entered the manor, everything appeared to be normal. Was something wrong with his sixth sense, after all? It might have something to do with overtraining. Whatever it was, he just couldn't find out what has been bothering him this entire time. Well, that was until he opened the door to his room. Who did this? Captain Fowler shouted as he found out that his room was completely emptied. The most precious Orc spirit portal bag of the clan, along with other belongings that he trapped in this small manor through various means, were all gone. Whoever did this was not sparing him anything. The floor tiles on the ground were all made of the best meditation jade. Even a small piece of it could effectively stop one's mind from being interfered with negative thoughts, which was something that happens a lot more to people in the upper level of their training. The higher the level, the easier it was to be bothered by various negative thoughts. Meditation jade was always an extremely precious asset for trainers. Not just from the humans, for the past 100 years, Fowler has been stealing and robbing it from anywhere he could live in the Orc Empire. He would then gather all the jade he's got and store it inside his room. Beds, tables, and chairs were made of the same kind of wood, which was only produced in Dragon Abyss. According to the legends, this timber was cut from the ambergris trees, which were trees that were watered with the saliva of dragons. When an ambergris tree grows, it will secrete a substance on its skin, which would attract dragons to come feed of it. And when the dragons fed themselves off the trees, more of their salivas would be poured and would help with the plant's growth. The wooden furniture made by ambergris timber could strengthen one's power of the will. For powerful fighters like Captain Fowler, it was what made him so invincible even against enemies in the intermediate rank. What saddened Captain Fowler the most was the pillow on his bed, which made with the core of a meditation gem piece. If it wasn't for this pillow, he would have had no need to be stuck in this middle-of-nowhere hideout. Except for the armor on his body and the weapons in his hand, everything that Fowler had was now gone. He just couldn't believe it. How could a location so heavily guarded be robbed like this? Worse yet, the culprit managed to escape without leaving a single trace. Captain Fowler shouted angrily, "Bring me all the humans inside this manor. I want them all to be interrogated." Before, humans and Wirgins were living in perfect harmony. Now, screams filled the air as the Wirgins did everything they could to make the humans speak. The humans did not even know what happened. They had no way to respond to the Wirgins' questions and were forced to die without a chance to defend themselves. As the last human lost his life, the Wirgins finally started to suspect each other. Was it one of us? Captain Fowler said skeptically. Captain Fowler started questioning each one of his soldiers. After a while, one Wirgin was found to be missing. While one side claimed that the Wirgin was in the fruit grove before, the other side was saying that he had come along with the wolf riders. After a heated debate leading to no end, the only conclusion was that the missing Wirgin was no longer to be found. Who is doing this to me? Captain Fowler thought to himself. For the treasures he stole over the years, he offended way too many people to be counted. While Fowler was going through his long list of rivals, Abel was enjoying his flight on White Cloud. Let's go to Harvest City, Abel said to himself. He had almost forgotten that there was a sum of unclaimed money to be collected. If he had remembered it correctly, it was located in the Gary Pharmacy store inside Harvest City. After locating the Gary's pharmacy shop, Abel took 2 quick breaths and calmed himself down. In a world as dangerous as this, he must not get too complacent. Cautiousness was what mattered the most. Yes, cautiousness. Take the stuff he's looted today, for example. He had never seen some of these items before, and he was sure that even Marshall wouldn't know about them. There was also that shocking howl made by Fowler. If he really had to fight such a terrifying opponent, could 3 exploding swords really have helped him to escape? The more Abel thought about it, the more he felt that his actions were too risky for his own good. Although he got himself a lot of good items, he didn't quite make an assessment of his enemy's abilities. He got lucky this time, but such blunders could be fatal at times. Speaking of which, he was already near the Harvest City. Since he couldn't risk being discovered from here, he jumped from White Cloud and put on a robe to cover his whole body. To hide his true identity, he paid the entrance fee to get inside whilst pretending to be a worker from the church. It was already evening during this time, and there were a lot of people out there on the street. Many nobles had already started their nightlife at this time. It seemed that the closer the night was, the more lively the city was. This marks the end of part 21 of the story, Abe the Wizard. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.